Let's delve into the fascinating story of Pontius Pilate's wife and the terrifying dream she had, as mentioned in Matthew 27. This dream happened during the trial and crucifixion of Jesus. After these events, she wrote a letter about them, which was discovered along with the Dead Sea Scrolls. The original letter is kept in an old manuscript collection in one of Italy's grand libraries. She wrote it to her friend Fulvia Ramelia, who lived in Italy. Luckily, we have a copy of this letter, and today we will share it with you so you can hear her side of the story. Make sure to subscribe for updates if we can't cover all the details in this video. But first, let me tell you about a must-read book called The Diaries of Pontius Pilate. This riveting tale begins with a mysterious murder by the Dead Sea and quickly pulls you into an enthralling adventure. The main characters, archaeologist Kevin Elliott and his deputy, Jill Gates, stumble upon an astonishing find: 20 copper scrolls containing jaw-dropping information about Pontius Pilate's investigation into Jesus' death and resurrection. As they uncover these ancient artifacts, Kevin and Jill realize they've found something extraordinary. The scrolls detail Pilate's personal inquiry into the events surrounding Jesus, offering a new perspective on a story many think they know well. They send photos of the scrolls for translation, hoping to unlock the secrets hidden within them. However, their discovery sets off a dangerous chain of events. Kevin and Jill soon find themselves in the middle of a perilous conspiracy, as powerful forces aim to keep these revelations hidden. The book keeps you on the edge of your seat as they navigate threats and uncover truths that could change history. Tom Lemon captures the essence of this thrilling read perfectly. Don't open this book unless you're sitting in a comfortable chair with good reading light, because you won't want to move. The story is a roller coaster of excitement from beginning to end, filled with suspense, intrigue, and unexpected twists. Okay, now let's get to our main story of the day. The letter of Pilate's wife, Claudia Procula, to her friend Fulvia Ramelia, read by Elizabeth Peter. You, my faithful friend, have been asking me to describe everything that has happened since we last saw each other. You might have heard some news, but without knowing all the details, it might make you anxious and curious about how I am. I will honor your request and try to recall the many events of this past year, even though they might seem strange and unsettling. Remember, the mysteries of life often veil the truth from our understanding, changing our fate in ways we can't predict. I won't describe the early days of my life, which passed quickly and peacefully under the care of my parents in Nebron. You know that at the age of 16, I married the Roman Pilate, a man from a distinguished family who was a governor in Italy at that time. Right after our wedding, I had to leave with him to the province where he was assigned. I wasn't particularly happy or fearful, but I missed you and my home deeply. The serene days at my parents' house, the beautiful statues, and the soft groves of Nebron were a constant memory that brought tears to my eyes. My life with Pilate was initially uneventful. He was much older than me, old enough to be my father, but he treated me with respect and kindness. Our days were filled with the duties of governance and the rituals of Roman life. However, everything changed when we arrived in Judea. Pilate's role as the governor here was far more challenging and dangerous. The people were restless, and there was always tension in the air. Then came the day of the trial. Pilate was conflicted and troubled. The man brought before him was Jesus of Nazareth, a figure who had stirred much controversy. I was deeply disturbed by a dream I had about him. In the dream, I saw visions of his suffering and felt a profound sense of injustice. I knew that this man was innocent, and I urged Pilate to have nothing to do with his condemnation. Despite my pleas, the pressure from the local leaders and the crowd was immense. After the trial and the crucifixion, I was haunted by what had happened. The weight of those events was heavy on my heart, and I felt a profound sadness. In my solitude, I wrote this letter to you, my dear friend, to share my thoughts and feelings. The mysteries of life and the forces that shape our destinies are beyond our understanding. these events have changed me forever. As I sit here in our home in Judea, far from the familiar comforts of Nabron, I often think of you and our peaceful days together. The memories of our friendship and the happy times we shared are a source of comfort to me. I hope this letter finds you well and brings you some insight into the turmoil I have experienced. The first years of my married life were calm and peaceful. Heaven blessed me with a son who became the light of my life. I spent all my leisure hours with him, sharing my sorrows and joys. When our son was 5 years old, Pilate received the emperor's appointment as procurator of Judea. Our journey to this new land was difficult, and we traveled with a retinue of servants. Despite the initial challenges, I grew to love this fertile and rich province, which my husband now ruled in the name of Rome, the master of nations. In Jerusalem, we were met with respect and hospitality, but I also felt a deep loneliness. The pride and contempt with which the Hebrews treated us, calling us foreigners and aliens, made me feel isolated. They believed we profaned their holy land, which they considered a divine gift promised to them by God. I spent much of my time with my son in the silent forests, where deer fed on olive branches and palm trees with their delicate fronds, more beautiful than those in Deos, stood tall over blossoming orange trees and fruit-bearing nards. In the cool shade, I would sew covers for the altars of the gods, or read the soothing verses of Virgil. These moments brought me peace. Pilate, burdened by his duties, spent little time with us. He was often in a dark mood, troubled by the challenges of ruling this land. He wanted to govern with a strong hand, but his efforts to keep the people in submission were met with resistance. The Hebrews, who had been independent for so long, were naturally inclined to rebellion. Though they were divided into countless noisy sects, they were united in their fierce hatred of the Romans. Then came the fateful day of the trial. Pilate was conflicted and troubled. The man brought before him was Jesus of Nazareth, a figure who had stirred much controversy. I was deeply disturbed by a dream I had about him. In the dream, I saw visions of his suffering and felt a profound sense of injustice. I knew that this man was innocent, and I urged Pilate to have nothing to do with his condemnation. Despite my pleas, the pressure from the local leaders and the crowd was immense. After the trial and the crucifixion, I was haunted by what had happened. The weight of those events was heavy on my heart, and I felt a profound sadness. In my solitude, I wrote this letter to you, my dear friend, to share my thoughts and feelings. The mysteries of life and the forces that shape our destinies are beyond our understanding. These events have changed me forever. So far, one family of the better society in Jerusalem showed some benevolence towards me. This family belonged to the director of the synagogue, Jairus. I found great pleasure in visiting his wife, Salome, who proved to be a model of kindness, and she also showed it in relation to her daughter, Semida, who was 12 years old. Semida was lovely and beautiful like the dawn over Sharon, with fair curls. Sometimes they spoke to me of the God of their ancestors and read parts of their holy books. What shall I tell you, Fulvia? I remember certain hymns, works of Solomon, praising the God of Jacob, this only God who is eternal and impenetrable, whose words and sentences we notice on our altars, calling them divine. I perceived that he was omnipotent and merciful, and combines in himself kindness, purity, and greatness. I remember Semida's voice sounding like the strings of the harp when she sang the holy hymn to the wise and great King of Israel. Often, in my loneliness and beside the cradle of my son, I tried to play to him on my instrument. Upon my knees, I called him many times. Against my will, I pleaded with this God in the humility and tranquility of my soul and heart, committing my destiny and welfare to him as a slave submits to his master. And oh wonder, I immediately arose consoled and heartened. After a while, Semida fell ill. One morning, I woke up to the sad news that she had peacefully passed away in her mother's arms. Heartbroken, I took my child and rushed to be with her mother, Salome, and the mourners. When we arrived at their house, it was so crowded with mourners that my servants had to struggle to make a path for us. As we got closer, the crowd suddenly parted, letting a group of men approach the house. The people watched them with great respect. In front, I saw Samida's father. Surprisingly, instead of looking sad, he had a hopeful expression I couldn't understand. He was with 3 other men who looked poor and humble, dressed in simple clothes. Behind them was a young man, dressed similarly. When I tried to look at him, his presence was so bright that I had to look away, as if staring at the sun. His forehead seemed to glow, and his hair fell on his shoulders like a Nazarene. I can't fully describe how I felt when I saw him. It was the most intense emotion I've ever experienced. His face was unbelievably beautiful, but his eyes had a look that inspired a secret fear, as if they could turn us to dust. I followed him without him noticing. The door opened, revealing Samida lying on a bed surrounded by candlesticks and perfumes. She looked even more beautiful in her peaceful rest, her forehead a pale pink, like the rose placed on her. Death had left faint marks around her eyes and lips. Salome stood beside her, numb and almost unresponsive, as if she didn't even see me. Samida's father fell at the feet of the unknown man, the one with the powerful presence. He approached Samida's bed and, showing her to the man, cried out, "Oh my Lord, my daughter is in the arms of death, but if you will it, she will rise." Hearing these words, I shivered, and my heart seemed to stop. The man took Samida's hand, and with a commanding look said, "Maid, arise." Samida rose from her bed as if lifted by an invisible hand. Her eyes opened, life returned to her lips, and she stretched out her hand, calling, "Mother." Salome, awakened by her daughter's call, embraced her, both of them overwhelmed with emotion. Jus fell at the feet of the man he called Lord, kissing the hem of his garment, and asked, "What must I do to receive eternal life?" "Love God and men," was the reply. Then, like a shadow, he disappeared from sight. I found myself on my knees, not knowing what I was doing. Rising as if from a dream, I went home, leaving behind a family rejoicing in indescribable happiness. At dinner, I told Pontius about what I had seen and heard. He looked down and said, "You saw Jesus of Nazareth, the target of hatred from the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Herodian party, and the powerful priests of the temple. Their anger is growing daily, and they're fixated on getting him killed. But despite their rage, Jesus speaks with wisdom, and his miracles seem to be from God. Why do they hate him so much?" I asked. "Because he exposes their flaws and hypocrisy. I once heard him call the Pharisees whitewashed tombs and snakes, accusing them of making life hard for others while doing nothing to help. They're obsessed with tiny rituals but ignore the bigger principles of justice and mercy." His words hit a nerve with these arrogant leaders, and things don't look good for him. "But you'll protect him, right?" I said, feeling angry. "My power isn't strong enough to stand against these rebellious people," Pontius replied, "and I would hate to be forced to kill such a wise man." With that, he got up and went to another room, lost in thought. I was left feeling overwhelmed with sadness and despair. The day of the Passover approached. On this great and, for the Hebrews, so very important a holy day, a great many people from all parts of Judea gathered in Jerusalem to solemnly carry the victims of the feast to the temple. The procession generally took place on Thursday. Before this holy day, Pontius told me that the Nazarene's future was extremely insecure. A conspiracy was brewing over his head, and it might be that on this evening he would be delivered into the hands of the high priest. I trembled when I heard these words, and I asked my husband, "You will protect him, won't you?" "I cannot," replied Pontius, with a mournful expression on his face. The fate of which Plato spoke and which he predicted would befall righteous men will, it seems, reach also to Jesus. He will be persecuted, contemptuously treated, and delivered to a cruel death. When it was time for bed, and I lay down to sleep, something strange took over my mind. I dreamed of Jesus, appearing as the divine figure described in their scriptures. His face shone brilliantly, like the sun, and he soared on angelic wings. Flames carried out his commands as he hovered on a cloud, ready to judge everyone gathered before him. With a simple gesture, he separated the good from the bad. The good were lifted up to eternal salvation, while the bad were cast into a sea of fire, far hotter than anything imagined in ancient myths. As this divine judgment unfolded, Jesus revealed his wounds to the crowd and spoke in a powerful voice, "Return to me the blood I shed for you." The condemned begged the rocks and mountains to hide them, but it was too late. Their false sense of security and illusions could not save them. They perished. It was an incredible dream, or rather, a profound vision. When dawn broke and the first light touched the temple rooftops, I woke up, feeling scared from the dream I had. To calm myself, I sat by the window. But then, I started to hear loud shouting coming from the center of town. The noise grew louder and louder, crashing over me like ocean waves. My heart raced, and sweat dripped down my forehead. Soon, the commotion grew closer, and the stairs leading to the court were crowded with people. In a panic, I grabbed my son, put a light coat on him, and rushed to find my husband. As we reached the door to the court hall, the noise inside intensified. I was too frightened to go in, so I peeked through the purple curtains. What I saw was startling. Fulvia and Pontius were in the court, with Pontius sitting on his grand ivory throne, looking calm and regal, just as Rome expects from its leaders. But despite his brave front, I could sense his deep concern. Bound with ropes and with his clothes torn and covered in blood, Jesus of Nazareth stood before Pontius, calm and unshaken. Despite his bruised and bloodied appearance, his face showed no signs of bitterness or fear. He remained as peaceful as a lamb, and his serenity filled me with dread, echoing the words from my dream, "Give me back my blood which I shed for you." Surrounding him was a furious, restless crowd that had brought him to trial. They were joined by guards, servants, and the angry Levites and Pharisees, their eyes burning with rage. The Pharisees stood out with scrolls of laws tied to their heads. The crowd was seething with anger and envy, their faces glowing with a fiery intensity that made it seem like they were driven by a wild, primal rage. Finally, my husband signaled for silence to be restored. "What do you want?" he asked. "We demand the death of this man, Jesus of Nazareth," one of the priests said on behalf of the crowd. "Herod has sent him to you for judgment." "What are the charges against him? What did he do wrong?" Pontius asked. The crowd's fury erupted again. "He predicted the temple's destruction. He claims to be the King of the Jews, the Christ, the Son of God. He's insulted our priests," shouted the Levites. "Crucify him!" the crowd cried out. The echoes of their shouts still linger in my ears, and the image of the innocent man will never leave my mind. Pontius then asked Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" "It is as you say," Jesus replied. "Are you the Christ, the Son of God?" Pontius asked again, but Jesus remained silent. The crowd's shouting grew even louder, their voices resembling the wild howls of hungry beasts. "Hand him over to us so he can be crucified." Pontius tried to quiet them once more and said, "I find no guilt in this man. He is acquitted. Hand him over, crucify him," the enraged voices demanded. Unable to bear the noise any longer, I called one of my servants and asked him to bring Pontius to me for a moment. He quickly left the courtroom and came to my side. I fell at his feet and pleaded, "For the sake of everything you hold dear, and for the sake of this child, our bond, don't let yourself be responsible for the death of this righteous man who seems almost divine. I saw him in a dream last night, surrounded by heavenly glory, judging the people. Among those cast into the fires of hell, I saw the faces of those who sought his death. Please, don't harm him. Even one drop of his blood could condemn you forever. I'm also frightened by what's happening, Pontius replied. But what can I do? The power of our Roman gods is weak compared to the anger of these people. They're not seeking justice, but revenge. Please, Claudia, take the child and go to the garden. You shouldn't have to see this terrible scene. After Pontius left, I was alone, crying bitterly in my despair and pity. Jesus continued to be mocked and beaten by the crowd and rough soldiers, their anger growing as they saw his calm patience. Horrified, Pontius returned to his throne. The crowd, seeing him again, immediately began shouting, "Put him to death! To death!" According to an old tradition, the governor would release a prisoner during the Passover as a gesture of mercy. Pontius hoped to use this tradition to save Jesus. He asked the crowd, "Which prisoner do you want me to release today, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" "Release Barabbas," the crowd demanded. Barabbas was a notorious robber and murderer known throughout the region. Pontius asked, "And what should I do with Jesus of Nazareth?" "Crucify him," they shouted. "What crime has he committed?" Pontius inquired. The crowd's rage intensified as they screamed, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" In his desperation, Pilate bowed his head. The crowd's insolence grew stronger by the moment. Pilate feared that this situation in Jerusalem could undermine his authority and the power of Rome, which he was committed to protecting. With only a small bodyguard and a few local troops loyal to Rome, he felt increasingly vulnerable. And that's where we'll pause for now. To avoid making this video too long, we'll continue with part 2 in the next upload. If you'd like to stay updated, make sure to subscribe. I'll also share the link to the book I mentioned in the description and pin it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.